So your life takes an unexpected turn and kicks you in the balls. You're made redundant. Got to ask yourself one important question. How much stuff can I make from 6 doors? So in my last video I talked about how I got into woodworking as a way to try and keep my spirits up with the depressing way that UK higher education is going, because professor of chemistry, and there's been wave after wave of redundancies, and I thought at the time, and perhaps naively, I was kind of safe. They'd trimmed enough fat and I was gonna be able to continue. Unfortunately, the axe fell and I was made redundant. So the question is, do I try and make a go of woodworking, turn it from a hobby into something more of a living, or do I try and get back into academia? And the problem is, everywhere's in the same position. Redundancies everywhere, no one's really hiring, and if the government ever get their finger pulled out and refinance the sector and make it more sustainable, well, there's going to be a hell of a lot of postdocs coming from PhDs who are going to be young, enthusiastic, and those are the people who are going to revitalise the HE sector in the UK. So do I make a go of woodworking and try and turn it into something I can make money out of? We'll see. So in my first video, I made these A-frame sawhorses and this tabletop to give me a bench to work outside. Our new neighbours were renovating, throwing out their internal doors, and these were destined for firewood, so I saved them to see if I could make something out of them. And it's amazing how much wood you get out of these doors with all the stiles, rails, mullins, not to mention the 9mm thick panels. So I'm going to make some tables with these doors. So first I took some panels, I sanded them to get a good surface for gluing, and then I cut them into thin strips. And then using the technique that Morley Kurt used in one of his breakthrough videos, and Mark Dana uses a lot for turning shipping pallets into flat panels for tabletops, I laminated these together. So to use them as a tabletop, they needed planing, but I didn't have a planer at the time, and so my neighbour over the road, Carl, was kind enough to let me run these through his 13-inch planer. So as you will have gathered, I don't have a garage or internal workshop, but I am a member of Leeds Hackspace, and there are many Hackspace and community workshops that you can become a member of in towns and cities across the UK. So I got myself inducted on the Hackspace's panel saw in order to trim the edges of these laminate panels, square them up, and then once squared up, glued them together to make a larger panel as the top of my first table. So whilst I can work in the Hackspace, I want some of my own tools as well to use at home, and it was my first big purchase, the Evolution R255 TBL Plus table saw. So this table saw has sold out whenever batches of it have come into the UK, and it's been lauded by many as the best budget table saw, comes in at under £400 and is a serious challenger for the established players like DeWalt. So my table needs some legs, and I'm using some of the styles to cut down to make some tapered legs. Kind of forgot to film that, but have made some half lap joints and going to glue them up to build a frame with the legs. So making these lap joints a little oversized, I cleaned them up with my router and a flush trim bit. So my hand's kind of in the way, but with the slot cutting bit, I'm cutting little slots to put Z-clips in to hold the tabletop to the base. So before final construction, I'm giving the table a bit of a finish using some Osmo hard wax oil. So after getting the legs lined up on the tabletop, I'm putting in the Z-clips and marking out the holes they need to drill. And once all my holes are drilled, I can put in my 6 Z-clips and then screw them down, and the table is done. So I've made an edge grain laminate strip tabletop. Now I'm making a second table out of these doors using the Stiles and Mullins and rails to make a face grained thick chunky tabletop. So after removing the tenons on the end, I ran them through the table saw to remove the moulding that held the panels. So to try and get a really nice flat glue up for this second tabletop, I needed to have a really flat reference surface. So I rescued this old desk, this school desk that was being thrown out. I sawed the legs off so that I could use the legs as straight edges to go with the flat tabletop surface, and I'd be able to use this for clamping. So with all my blocks of wood from the stiles and the rails and the mullins from the doors, I put them into an arrangement that I thought looked quite good. When I was happy, glued them all up, got the legs as straight edges to provide clamping pressure, and put a couple of clamps on and got them some good glue squeeze out, and then left that to dry. So the new tabletop wasn't quite flat, and it was also too wide to go through a planer. So another thing that I wanted to build was a router sled so that I could do slab flattening. And again, the tabletop from this old desk comes in handy as a reference surface, using the metal frame to rest the router sled on. So after flattening the slab, I took the ends off using the table saw and cleaned up the sides before giving it a good sand. So I built myself a little router table as well, and I gave the tabletop a good chamfer because, as Mark Dana said, it makes you feel good on the inside. So I wanted to try something different for the base for this table, and so mortise and tenons are coming into play. So I used the table saw and a crosscut sled to make the tenons, and then used a router to cut out the mortises. the best tenons in the world, but after a little bit of a dry fit, a little bit of minor adjustment with the chisel, managed to get a decent dry fit ready for glue up. Now you watch all these YouTube woodworking videos and they always make a big thing about making sure things are square, but never really give you any advice on how actually to make sure things do actually get square. And this was a right faff. Clamps everywhere. So to attach the tabletop to this one, instead of the Z clips, I'm using figure of 8 clips this time. And one thing I noticed with these figure of 8 clips, the screws provided have round tops. And then when you look at them from the side, they're slightly proud of the frame, so no use for actually attaching the table. So I found these drywall screws instead, and these have a nice flat top and did the job. So again, finishing with some Osmo hard wax oil. And there we have it, table number 2 completed. What I wanted to do to try and make another tabletop, which hasn't actually made it to a tabletop yet, was having done edge grain and face grain, I wanted to try and do end grain. So making panels, gluing them up, I'm going to borrow from the ideas of making end grain cutting boards by, after planing the panels, then cross-cutting them into strips and then gluing those strips end grain up and then cleaning up the surface. So as I said, this one hasn't quite made it to a table yet, but it will do at some time in the future. But this was coming up towards Christmas time, and I had some fairs booked in for some of the other things I'd been making, and I needed an advertising sign. So there we go. So I haven't shown it here, but in addition to the 2 tables, I also made a hallway table using the rest of that rather large amount of laminated panel, and also a little cupboard for the hallway. I don't really need a house full of tables, and so tried to sell some of these things, and these have been donated to a local charity, Sunshine and Smiles, which gives work experience for Down syndrome kids to work in a cafe. So, am I gonna make a ton of money out of taking apart doors and making them into bits of furniture? No. I have sold one of the tables, however, but that wasn't the main purpose of the exercise. This video has taken months to kind of do the woodwork. So what that work has done though is given me some skills, allowed me to practice. Looking back through the video, I can also see that I probably didn't have the best practice using table saw, things like that, things that I've improved since. So the main thing is I have learnt a lot. On the job front, I have applied for 3 jobs that have come up. Competition is going to be insane, so we'll see how that goes. But it's given me the skills to move forward. And so if I am to make some money out of this, then what I need to do is come up with a strategy. Things that I can make in bulk and be able to sell. And some of that is going to be the subject of some upcoming videos. So see you on the next one.